Is Canada truly one united country, or are we 13 separate economies? That is a question that many people are asking, and it's a question that, comes up when people talk about the issues of Western alienation or Quebec separatism. But it is a fair question, and the IMF is certainly saying it's a fair question because, according to a new report from the International Monetary Fund, Canada's economy is so balkanized that we essentially have the equivalent of 13 separate economies with a 9% domestic tariff. That is because there are so many barriers to internal free trade within Canada that we have the equivalent of, as I said, a 9% domestic tariff. So while we are worried about tariffs from other countries like the United States, we have to be worried about protectionism here at home. When Prime Minister Mark Carney became Prime Minister, he said he was going to get rid of all internal barriers to free trade within Canada by July 1st, 2025. But of course, in Mark Carney fashion, he scaled that back and has since said he was going to get rid of federal barriers to internal trade by July 1st, 2025. Well, guess what? It's a bunch of months later and we still have all kinds of barriers to internal trade. And that is why we still have the equivalent of a 9% domestic tariff on trade between our provinces. The report from the IMF says this is costing our economy $210 billion a year, and we must open up our economy in order to thrive in the modern era, and also in order to survive the protectionism we are seeing around the world. So Prime Minister Mark Carney needs to step up and show some leadership. He needs to call the premiers to Ottawa and make sure that they get rid of the internal barriers to trade at the provincial level. And if they don't, the Prime Minister should withhold federal funding for certain programs, because this is absolutely essential. We are a confederation, and there's no reason why we should have 13 separate economies with a 9% domestic tariff that is essentially throwing money out the door and stopping economic growth. And this is costing some of our smaller provinces like Prince Edward Island up to 40% of GDP. They could have a 40% increase in GDP per capita if we got rid of these internal barriers to trade. So this is absolutely essential, it's doable, and it's a must. And Prime Minister Mark Carney should call the premiers to Ottawa, round them up, and make sure we tear down these internal trade barriers now.